continue. There we go. How you doing, Tim?
Oh, doing just fine. Thanks again for your time, man.
Oh, no problem. No problem.
Right. We left off last time with your experience writing "Where's the Rain."
Okay. Oh yeah, I
We
remember.
covered that pretty extensively. The next track I think is equally personal. I was wondering about Maureen.
Well, Maureen was my mom's name. It was about. It wasn't about her as much as the situation it was when she died. The thing. If you listen to it on its surface, it's about somebody losing his mother and all that stuff. But the subtext is kind of you know there was a lot of conflict. I'm sorry, did I lose you?
No, I'm still here. I heard you.
Can
I'm
you
listening.
see me?
What's that? Yeah.
See me?
Yes, sir.
Button and something happened. I can't. I'm gonna try this again. Hold on a second. I guess there we go. Okay, sorry. Yeah, there's a lot of subtext because there was a lot of conflict between me and my mom. She was a very brilliant woman, but at the same time, she didn't really
deeper kind
accomplish
of
things that she'd hoped to.
in
But the whole song is
and that
very
led
much
to a lot
just
of
kind of
conflict and
reporting what happened,
unpleasant
it's like,
situations. We'll
I
just
was
leave it at that.
And so the song isn't just about losing a parent; it's about an unresolved conflict, unresolved relationship, and there was the deeper kind of subtext in that, and but the whole song is very much just kind of reporting what happened. It's like I was I was in Tennessee visiting a buddy up there, and I found out my mom had a stroke, and they were watching a football game, and obviously I couldn't think of anything else. So, and then when I had some time, I was kind of just when you lose a parent, it's a very foundational shift in your life. I think you said both your parents are still around.
My father passed away in January of 19.
Okay, so you know what it's like.
That's why it hits so. That song hits me pretty hard. I certainly think of my dad. I was at the hospital on his last day. I was his last child to see him before he passed.
How many kids were there?
Four of us. Four biological and one step.
Okay. There was I had seen my mom because I was in New Orleans, but I was going back to see her, and I missed it by like 10 minutes. And so it was but I wrote the song. I wrote the bulk of the song before she passed, and then the very end of it where I talk about, telling somebody, you love them. I was comfortable. My mom knew I loved her. I knew she loved me. There was a lot of unresolved conflict, but due to age and time, those things were never going to be resolved anyway. So it was a lot of just coming to terms and coming to peace with that. Just having that raw moment of just, I know you have to go, but don't leave yet, please.
Right.
Please don't. But time was up, and you just got to deal. So.
Yeah, no. While I was in the hospital, I mean, that's when they made the decision to just give him meds and kind of pull the life support.
Yeah.
And he was unconscious when my sisters arrived, and he passed away, I think, at like around 5 o'clock the next morning.
Yeah.
But
it's such a foundation.
Sir?
It's such a foundational shift. It's difficult to explain. It's like telling people who don't have children about children. It's not a matter of saying you don't know, you're stupid. Right. You can't understand the gravity and the density of the situation unless you're confronted with it, because when your parents pass away, it's such a foundational shift in life, as you know. And when you have kids and you're raising them, there's just an intense vulnerability that you can't explain unless you're raising a kid.
Unless you know it, yes.
Yeah, it's great, but at the same time, I've never felt more vulnerable in my life.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. That's the crux of that. Is there anything you want to ask about anything else about the song? It's pretty straightforward. you know.
Yeah, no, it's very clear what the message is, what the song is about. I mean, it's obvious. I just wanted to chat about it a little bit.
Sure.
Next one I have here on my list is I Believe, one of my favorites.
Before we go to that, there's something else I wanted to say about Where's the Rain?
Sure.
And I told my wife this the other day, and I've never really told anybody this, but it touches on Where's the Rain, and it also touches on all the other songs. If you know, a lot of songs are written in very different ways. Some songs like Where's the Rain and like Easy came to me the same way. They're like fully formed. I can literally just see them, in front of me. And Where's the Rain came not too soon after my dad passed away. And the vibe I got when the song hit me, my first wife, I was married. The woman I was married to the first time, we had just had a little boy about 6 months before, and I can't remember if she was working or if she was just asleep, and he was asleep too. So it was really early in the morning. I was just there by myself, and the song just hit me. I remember feeling like, my dad was a very reserved character. He was a very quiet guy. He didn't like confrontation very much. He didn't deal with things like that too well. And my mom was pretty much the opposite. And they were very much a case of opposites attracting. My mom was very histrionic at times and things like that. And so I remember I just had this real intense vibe that when that song hit me, that I believe that songs, just like anything, they're it's difficult to explain. Songs are, the way I experience them, they're little pieces of energy that are passed from one realm, I guess, to another. And the songs I write are the ones that just kind of flow through me. Some of them are work, and some of them just present themselves fully formed. But a song in and of itself I believe, is a very living, breathing entity, because like people like you take a song and you have your own personal relationship with it, your own personal experience with it. And I really felt like that song, Where's the Rain, because of the immediacy, and it just a vibe. I felt it was either my father personified in a song, because he really, towards the end of his life, he really started kind of appreciating what I did and how I did it, and or it could be just kind of a gift he sent me, sort of. And I believe in that stuff. I have a lot of strong faith that I've come into, I've always been kind of a searcher. I've always been kind of looking to see what, the answer or answer is, or answers are, that kind of thing. And that song was, because it hit me so immediately, and it seemed like something that my father may have put together, in whatever expressive realm he was in, and just kind of gave to me, because it was like nothing else I'd ever written. It just kind of came forth, and as a living, breathing entity, it seemed like I was able to effortlessly personify my grief. But at the same time, like a lot of people our age, your age, and younger, you know, my mom passed away relatively not quick, but it wasn't a long drawn out ordeal. It was like maybe 2 or 3 weeks. My dad's ordeal with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's was just long and cruel. It was like 4 years, just long drawn out. And I got the feeling that that song presented itself to me as my dad just kind of, his soul or his spirit feeling free and expressive for the first time in a long time. So there's that element to that song too.
Yeah, when my father passed, it was stage 3 lung cancer when they found it, and he went through chemo and some radiation. It was about, I feel like, a 6-month process before it ended. And I spoke to him every single day on the phone on the way home. He's always lived about 6 hours from me.
Yeah. Where was he? Where did he live?
Right outside Memphis.
Okay, cool. Where around there? Where?
Collierville. So I believe it's the southwest edge of Memphis.
Collierville, yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen signs.
I'm sure you have.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that if we have some time today. Question for you though about Where's the Rain, the actual experience writing that song. I think I mentioned last time we spoke, one song came to me similarly. I'm working through that now. But
Yeah.
what was the scene? I know you said your family was asleep, and I believe you went on the front porch and just looked out.
Back porch. Back porch.
Back porch, okay.
Looked out, and it was just right there. It was just right there. Because I remember, I've always liked the expression of rain. You know, like I had a song called "God Makes the Rain,"
Mhm.
ironically, partially about my brother passing away in the early '90s, and that was actually two songs that I put together, two songs that I had that I put together, not totally different things, but I guess very kind of similar. But I've always liked the expression of rain. You know, like there's a great song, an old soul song. I forgot who did it because I wish it would rain. You know, and the guy's describing how lonely he is, or and or it's not. I'm sorry. It's either I wish it would rain. No, that's Nancy Griffith. Um, and it feels like rain. He's describing, getting his heart broken or whatever, and it feels like rain. It's just wow. I just like that. Rainstorms always kind of hypnotize me.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, the
Anything else?
next song on the list was "I Believe." It is one of my favorites. And I sent you that text, man. I was at the bar at my buddy's wedding reception, and all of a sudden it turns on. I look at the DJ and just smile at him, and that's when I texted you. What was
Cool.
the process or inspiration for that one?
It was weird. It came, songs can come out of strange places, right? I remember this clear as day. We were in New York City getting ready to play a show. And the way the band learns songs is we don't get to rehearse much because everybody lives elsewhere and we all have lives. So what we'll do is like during sound checks, we will learn songs, when we're testing the equipment, like hour and a half, something like that. We'll go over songs. We'll just keep playing them over and over at different sound checks until we feel comfortable. That's the way we've always learned songs.
Really?
Apart from when we first got together and had some opportunities for rehearsal, and then when we were on major labels, there would be financial. There'd be money set aside in order to pay for time for rehearsals, not just the renting of rehearsal space, but making sure everybody got paid while to rehearse.
Mhm.
And so, we don't have access to that as much these days. But so I remember we were rehearsing, and I forget what song it was. And some of my songs always go in circles, like chord wise. There's always a circle. There's always like a point where it goes back home to where the circle is complete. Sometimes it's 2 chords, sometimes it's 10 chords. And it was one of those songs, and I don't remember what song it was, where it was a lot of chords. And John was frustrated because he was like, he had just flown in and he was tired and cranky. And I was trying to show him the chords, telling him what chords it was. He just went, "Motherfucker, you write too many goddamn chords in your songs." And I took it personally. I was like, all right. I thought to myself, all right, you're rotten so and so. I'll write a song with 2 chords. And then so it just kind of, and then right there it just kind of hit me that and it wasn't I wasn't consciously trying to write a song, but kind of the words, just my state of mind at the moment. What you're going to do with the restlessness inside your worried mind, because I felt like things were slipping away, and then I remember came up with the melody, and then I believe in, I thought, okay. I thought to myself, okay, well, what is it I believe in? I thought, okay. And then it became kind of more of an esoteric process, I believe in I believe in rock and roll. Not rock and roll. I believe not in rock and roll. I believe in the spirit of
Yep.
rock and roll. That feeling of release, that feeling of just, that some people find through rock and roll, some people find through poetry, some people find through running, some people find through just screaming or dancing. That was a very important delineation. I believe in the spirit of rock and roll. And then, in the immortal strength, what is it? The eternal strength
Eternal
of the
strength of
immortal.
the immortal soul.
Yeah.
And
And it's like,
sometimes
I
everybody's got to let
started,
it go.
yeah. And I just started thinking, okay, what do I actually believe in? What do I, Fred LeBlanc, actually believe in? Because I didn't want to sit there and give a bunch of platitudes, trying to please an audience. It's like, okay, if I'm going to go here, what do I actually believe in? I thought to myself, okay, what are the things I actually believe in? It's like, I thought you know, I believe in, all the things listed. I believe in the spirit of rock and roll, the eternal strength of the immortal soul. I genuinely believe it. And sometimes everybody's just got to let it go. It seems kind of obvious. And then it's like, I believe, and then that line just kind of came to me from somewhere else. I believe in the power of love. And it resolved this. I was like, wow, wow, wow. And I thought, yeah, okay. And I was like, I genuinely do believe in this, and then, and then I believe in the sound of Sam and Dave, who are an old R&B duo who wrote that song, or they sang that song, Hold On, I'm Coming, Soul Man. I just love them, and I was listening to them at the time. And a manager that we had at the time, he was trying to accentuate the New Orleans connection, right? And he was like, you got to make it like Fats Domino and Dave Bartholomew. You got to say, I believe in the sound of Fats and Dave. It's like, no, I love that stuff, but this is a specific thing. I believe in the sound of Sam and Dave.
Yeah.
And I didn't move from that, because these are things I believe in that moment. I believe in the sound of Sam and Dave, that little children should occasionally misbehave. That all that you get is all that you gave. I guess I should have all that you got. I should have sang all you got. I guess I didn't think that. All you got. Yeah, too late to change it.
I like Gabe. Yeah, it's a little bit late to change that one. Yeah,
Yeah, too late to change it.
It's playing at wedding receptions, man.
Yeah, and then have to fuck up all those at wedding receptions, man. I believe in the power of love, and then I just kind of looked at it. It's like, okay, let me. And then I thought, for the rest of it, it's like, okay, what do I do here in terms of? I'm just going to state things I believe in. I'm going to jump off this cliff and see where I land. And then I got to the other end of the song. It was like, okay, this works. And I didn't really, it didn't really. It's not one of the ones that presented itself to me fully formed, but it came out in little bits. And then once I was able to kind of jump off that cliff of making a real personal investment, instead of trying to hide it between wordplay or something like that, it's like, that song's pretty much me naked, I mean, like the little boy, standing there, absorbing everything that's going on around him. And then eventually all those people will turn to me for answers. It's like, okay. And, what's really changed, just the passing of time. It's like, the spirit's the same. The person, has grown up, you've learned a lot, obviously, but at the same time, it's like all of a sudden the perspective changes, and there's really, there's a lot to be said for that. And that was kind of how I felt as a kid, and then all of a sudden, all these people expected me to have the answers, and I don't have answers. I'm looking just like anybody, so all I could really do was kind of state where I was coming from. Unfortunately, that, the way my mind works, or whatever, melodically, I believe da 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 da, and obviously there's more than two chords in the song. And then the bridge, I've got to try, find the best of me and keep that part alive. Why would I ever want to shut that down and kill my soul? And that was kind of like, I was feeling like there was a lot of conflict at that time, a lot of conflict with regards to uh, where my career was going, this band that I had dedicated kind of my life to, and just realizing that I wanted something else. Like, I believe in these things. I believe in the power of love. So, it wasn't long after that, I got married for the first time, and that did not work out. But, um, And I mean, anybody who's in a marriage, it takes two to tango and it takes two to mess it up. I'm just as responsible as anybody, probably more so on some things on that. But uh, I ended up getting two kids out of it, and it was, it's tough to deal with in a divorce situation, especially when it's, somewhat antagonistic. But my life's better for having those kids in it, so.
Sure.
And that song was really pivotal because it really resonated with a lot of people, like, instantaneously. And there are two different versions. Yeah, obviously there's two different versions of it. There's a straight version that we did on an album called Fearless, and but we also had another song there called Kelly Ripa that got more attention simply because it was pretty immediate. uh but I always thought I Believe was a missed opportunity. And then when, because the first version I pretty much just recorded by myself in my home studio, and it kind of plods a little bit. It's a good version. I like it, but I like the kind of funkier, the kind of swing, because that's the way I just found myself playing it live when we started approaching it live. That was a difficult one to really get out there live, because I didn't really know how to approach it as a drummer. And the guitar player we had at the time, he actually was a decent drummer. So we had this thing where I'd play acoustic and he would play like the floor tom, and I'd keep the beat on the kick. It was different, but it was a little too convoluted. And then after he left, I just figured it out. Just took the time to figure it out. But that song really resonated, like, immediately with lots and lots and lots of people. And as I tell people, like, during the shows, that song is second in popularity only to Jenny Says. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, because that really, and I think if somebody took it and ran with it, that song could be a monster hit. But, that takes resources and, and energy that, I just don't have. So
Sure.
maybe somebody will grab it one day and turn it into something more. You never know. It might be a song somebody finds and all of a sudden it explodes, or not. Who knows? But I mean, it's out there, and the people that know it love it. I mean, they
Yeah.
love it. That song never fails to get an insane reaction live. I mean, people love that song, and it really, by talking about myself, apparently that really resonated with a lot of people. Present company included. Talk about you, Tim. You.
Well, I'm here. I love that
Yeah.
one, man. That was
Yeah.
what I think the different version was on the This Train
Yeah,
album, right?
we put the second version on the This Train album, then we did a remix version for the Greatest Hits Part 2, because we ended up doing a video for it. Just trying to get it out there, trying to get people to find it,
Okay.
like that. But I mean, there's a lot of, and if you're gonna apply your trade inside the matrix of what we do in the entertainment matrix, it costs a lot of money. Costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
Never be fooled thinking that stuff is just popular. It's not. Those things cost a lot of money.
Yeah. All right. Um, Next one here on my list is Watch the Water.
Watch the Water. um, One of my best friends, one of my dearest friends, is and I'm not trying to drop names, but he has a pretty significant part in this song. Is Guy Fieri, the TV chef.
Okay.
He's a really good buddy of mine. We were friends before he was famous, and he used to bring. He had a couple of small restaurants in the Bay Area in San Francisco, and outside of San Francisco, Santa Rosa. He was just a local guy doing his thing, and he loved the band. He saw us play one night. We were on this tour, co-headlining with Bed and Ezra around the country, and a band from New Orleans. They had some hits. Good band, really good band. And but the one place we played in Petaluma, California, and it was the only show of the entire tour that wasn't packed. In fact, it was pretty much empty. And you know, I don't voluntarily like putting myself in those situations, but when those types of things happen, I don't shy away from it. It's like kind of like, okay, because my theory is, you you can put a monkey on stage, in front of 20,000 people, and it'll be entertaining. It's not really that difficult if you know what you're doing to entertain 10, 20,000 people, a huge crowd. The trick is, can you be great in front of a small crowd, or, you know, a crowd with almost nobody there. It was a room that was fit for like 1,000 people, and there were maybe 50 in there, right? And so during the show, Guido, Guy, that's our nickname for him. He's in the back. Nobody was in the front, right? And we're kicking, just kicking ass, doing our thing. About third or fourth song in, I see this guy with this spiky hair, and it's like, who is this son of a bitch? So, and he's sitting there at a table, and he's just exuding attitude, like, I don't like this. Just, him and his buddy were there. His buddy apparently brought him to see us because he was a fan. And Guy was sitting back there, just trying to be too cool, the California way. So the band's playing. I walk off the stage with my wireless mic, jump on the table that he's sitting at, and his face is like, like right here, belly and crotch level. And I'm sitting there, you spiky haired son of a bitch. And I just started messing with it. You think you're so cool, don't you? You think why don't you get your lazy ass up? And, because I do stuff like that when there's a lot of people who are hesitant, because my theory is nobody looks any dumber at a Cowboy Mouth show than I do, and it's just, I'm not really afraid to fall off the high wire face first. It's like, okay, brush yourself off, get back up. So what, and sometimes people kind of, have to be kind of pulled to that other edge, not physically, but they have to know that it's okay. It's just, I basically give people permission to go insane every night, and a lot of people need that, and so he's like giving me the stink eye, and I'm, come on, just giving him hell. And all of a sudden he just busts out laughing, and him and his buddy come up, and a whole bunch of other people come up. Now that's the story he tells. I don't remember it. I remember seeing him, but anyway, the next time we played around San Francisco, he brought us some food. It's like, hey man, I run a restaurant, I'd like to bring out some food. I'm like, sure. His food was good. He ran like a barbecue sushi place. It was delicious. So much so that we ended up losing our following in San Francisco because every time we played there, we were full. And we used to have this joke, we're called Cowboy Fat. It was just, but I mean, he turned out to be a really good friend for a long time. He was a friend of the band. Him and I, really got close, became really good friends. Anyway, I'm going somewhere with the story. Sorry, I'm just, when you talk about things, your mind floods with memories. Anyway, so he got in touch with me one day. He was calling all his friends, obviously, and just kind of feeling this out. He's like, hey man, I got this opportunity to kind of become like a personality on the Food Network. They're kind of, I entered this contest, and it seems like it's going to be, it seems like I might have a shot. And I was like, dude, you'd be great at that. Go for it. You got nothing to lose. Go for it, right? So then he got the show, his Diners and Drive-In show, and then it just exploded. He became one of the most recognizable people in the world, one of the biggest celebrities in the world. And it was very, it was ironic because we'd hang out and people would come up and get my autograph, and then it became we'd hang out, people would run up to him and get his autograph. But now it's like, he sent me a video the other day. It was funny. He was sitting on his boat. He has a boat, and he was at Key West and just chilling in his boat. And somebody in a big old yacht next to him came up cranking Jenny Says, and he's like, oh, look at that. It's just funny the way life works, And, we talked about how he, the fame stuff and how it affected him, and he works really hard to maintain strong relationships with his family. And anyway, we're friends. We've maintained the friendship for like over 20 years. When my boy was born, he's like, man, I can't wait to hear what the song you write when when you when you have a kid. I said, okay. And I didn't really try to push. I mean, initially I tried to push, okay, because it stayed in my mind for some reason. He was like, can't wait to hear what you wrote. And then it was like, and I realized I felt bad because, like, man, I'm not being inspired to write about this kid that I love more than anything. And one day, me and my little boy, we were playing. We had a little blow up pool in the backyard, and I'd sit in there with him. And he was about year and a half, something like that. He's holding the hose, and kids, when they're experiencing everything for the first time, like sunlight, breathing, food, different things like that. They're experiencing for the first time, and as an adult, you can kind of re-experience those things for the first time through their eyes. So I gave him the hose because we'd play in the pool and we'd splash around and things like that. It's just a little blow up pool. It wasn't even 2 or 3 feet deep. It was just had a little blow up slide that he would go. It's just we spent hours back there, hours. And I gave him the hose one time because I'd keep the hose running, just so we could keep it filled up and splash and stuff. Well, he held the hose up straight up, right? Because he didn't understand the concept of hose. And the water came and just splashed on his top of his head and his face. And he was just apoplectic. It's like, what? He didn't understand what was going on. And I said, well, baby, you got to watch the water. No, I said, baby, you got to watch where the water goes. And then it's like, boom, there it was. I mean, the whole thing right there. Everything I ever wanted my kid to know about life, or my kids to know about life, it all just kind of hit me. It's like, okay. And my son tells me, probably because he knows I'm a softie, he says, Daddy, my favorite song is Watch the Water. And I'm like,
Yeah.
But I mean, it's everything in there. Let's see, what are the words? What are the first? What's the first one?
I wonder if you're going to sleep and where you run to when you dream.
What?
I wonder if you're going to sleep and where you run to when you dream.
Yeah. Yeah, because I just, like any parent does, you just spend hours looking at your kid while they're sleeping. You just wonder, the whole nature of going to sleep, where the soul goes, where the psyche goes, the idea that, to be primitive, your soul goes back and at least reconnects with the greater essence of itself, goes to heaven, goes to another realm, whatever it is, astral planes, all that type of stuff. I want to know where he goes when he dreams, but he'll never be able to tell me. The lives we live here and there, what is it? The lives we live in
are never what they seem. The innocence you now possess to see the world the way you choose.
Yeah, it's something that we all
forget, but I hope
you
never lose.
Yeah, just that touching of heaven, that touching of the greater essence of the soul, the oversoul, as some people call it. The idea of being in touch with your greater self, making good decisions in life, understanding that all that glitters is not gold. In fact, a lot of times, the shiny things are the most dangerous and darkest and toxic things out there. So just watch where the water goes, and always smile when the sun comes down. It's a way of saying, when you're given challenges in life, don't shy away from them. Don't be afraid of them. Appreciate them, because they will help you grow in the long run.
Mhm.
Just the idea of not letting fear take over your life, because that became a big thing with me. Because when I was with regard to my first marriage, I was so terrified of losing everything that I lost everything. I lost my family, and that was very, very, very difficult. Anybody who ever wished ill on me, you know, you got your wish. It's
How old were the kids when that went down, the divorce?
my boy was like 3. Let's see. My boy was about 3.5, and my little girl was about 1. I think it had been going on for a while. We did not get along. We did
Yeah.
not get along. So, And, there were many reasons for it that I don't need to go into here. It's just
Sure.
interpersonal relationships falter. And, you know, there were things I wish I could have done better. There were things I wish, she would have done better, but, I got to the other side of it, and I made the decision to split, not in spite of my kids, but mostly because of my kids, because I realized I wanted them to see a relationship that would be constructive, and I wanted them to see their dad as strong and able to make his own decisions, not kowtowed under the will of somebody else whose will might have seemed stronger. I went through the same thing with my parents. My mom was very strong-willed and very dominant. She was very much a force of nature. And my dad, he was a good guy, but he was somebody who didn't like conflict a lot. And because of that, there were a lot of conflicts. And, I grew up seeing that. And I grew up thinking that my father wasn't quite everything that I'd hoped he would be. And that really skewed a lot of my perspective. When you grow up, you learn, people are people and everybody's just doing the best they can. And my dad was just doing the best he could with a volatile situation, but at the same time, through whatever reasons, I found myself in a very similar situation as him. And, it was one of those things where, okay, do I stay and, just kind of, remain in a defensive posture for the rest of my life? I noticed my kids were kind of starting to kind of see me the way I saw my dad. And, that was unacceptable. That was unacceptable. So, and, she'd been pushing me to, divorce for a long time. And I was always like, no, 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 no. And finally it just got to the point, okay, I'm done. you know. And I mostly did it, it doesn't make sense when you think about it, but you know, I wanted my children to be in a better situation. And while I was around, I knew they wouldn't be because of the relationship I had with their mom. So,
Now,
and,
did your career play a part in the tension, or it was
no,
more just
not at all.
personally?
No, not at all. Because we stopped grinding it out. We stopped touring all the time once I had my boy. And then, so I was around, I was present. I wasn't really prepared for it, because I'd been a touring musician, and I always thought that I'd been running towards something, but I was just as much running away from something too. And, I'd made a lot of mistakes, a lot of mistakes. And, this is the first time I was trying to say, okay, I'm here, I'm present for this, but I didn't really know how to approach it. It took me a while to get comfortable with it and become confident, saying, okay, I can do this. I'm actually good at this. It's like that with anybody. Nobody can prepare you for, for what, for that type of thing. And you just figure it out and make it work. And so there was a lot of that, and Watch the Water. We were still together, but mostly I was spending a lot of time with my boy. And that was, the whole idea of, like the middle. I know I haven't always been among the best of men, but anytime you fall, you get back up again. That's me kind of acknowledging my flaws, my faults, the things I wish I'd been better about, better decisions, I wishing I'd made better decisions, on, not only a professional, but personal level, but, um, the world is cruel in casual ways. And when it seems it's always been, that's when you understand, or when you find true happiness comes only from within. So, I realized at that point that, I'd been looking for something for all these years, and it was right there the whole time. So you just realize, okay, you choose your happiness. You choose your happiness by the decisions you make, by the actions you take, and by, basically, deciding, okay, every morning when I get up, I tried to kind of go through my mindset, just kind of putting myself where I want to be. There's this great lecture by this kind of theologian named Joseph Murphy, a little 15-minute thing called The Secret of Life. And just him talking about how he found people, who were like old age, but still really vibrant and living full lives, full active lives. And, he would ask them, how did you do it? How did you do it? It's like, be people who lived on, small islands, remote villages, things like that. He'd say like, how did you do this? He's like, simple. I have no peeves in my life. I have joy in my life. And every morning I say a specific prayer, and, and I do it, for about 10, 15 minutes a day until I feel comfortable in that point. I always, just kind of, I'd always been kind of searching for that whole God thing, the meaning of life, what's really going on. And then once I kind of stopped searching for it, I realized it was there the whole time, being an individual expression of a much greater, as we all are. We have the free will to do whatever we choose, but with that free will comes responsibility. So, and it was kind of a way of letting my kids know that the decisions they make in their lives will will impact their lives. Better decisions, ultimately a better life. And sometimes the hard decisions, the decisions you don't want to make, are the decisions you need to make. You know what I mean? And so it was a way of just kind of saying to my boy, and anybody else who came up later, like my little girl, my stepkids, things like that, just kind of, watch where the water goes. Life flows a certain way, and you can either go with the flow of life or you can go against it. And that's your choice, but, just always watch where it goes, you know, don't always be afraid of challenges. A lot of times they will kind of show us the better parts of ourselves, unexpectedly. Life doesn't always go where you think it will. So, and it's short. Life is short. I, it's so short. It's like you blink your eyes, 10 years passes, and that becomes a lot more apparent as you get older. It's hard to believe I've been doing Cowboy Mouth for 32 years.
Yeah.
I didn't think it would last a month. I honestly didn't think it would last a month, and here I am doing it. 32 years later. So
I was 4 years old, man.
I was 27.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so next.
All right. Well, no, that actually I think leads nicely into the next one, Pardon the Barking Dogs. I don't know if this appears on an album. I've searched around a little bit and I found an old copy of it. I think a signed copy of yours somewhere. But Always Give Thanks.
That's a true story.
Is that
Now,
not an album?
I had kind of a like in the early 2000s, we had it was when the record business started falling apart. Excuse me, I just got an attack. The record business kind of started falling apart, like the CD business, put it that way. It started moving towards like Apple iTunes and all that type of stuff. And it was like when you had these artists who were used to selling millions of CDs for which there was a decent royalty, because back then if people wanted that one song, they had to buy a whole album. They had to spend like $20. Oh, I like this song, boom. And people had a lot more money back then. And well, that framework died really quickly. So all of a sudden you had these bands who didn't really tour that much anymore, crowding up space in the clubs and the venues we were playing. So all of a sudden, like I remember within a 6-month period, I remember this was the advent of iTunes, Apple Music, when people could all of a sudden purchase that one song, right? Well, all these older bands, all of a sudden, they've lived these lives. They have wives and alimonies and things like that, financial things that they've gotten used to, but just having this money flow, all of a sudden that money flow stopped. You had all these bands returning to the road, Styx, Uriah Heep, bands like that all of a sudden, and they were taking up space. And I remember it was like, oh man. So it was a strange time because we had to kind of relearn our place inside of the entertainment business, and we were still a very popular and viable act, but things were changing. The space was being crowded. 9/11 had just happened, so money wasn't as free flowing as it was. We were still getting work, but you could see that things were headed kind of on a downward path. It just wasn't going to be as free and easy as it had been, and just a lot of our contemporaries were dealing with the same thing. They responded by kind of pulling back and kind of picking and choosing shows. We responded by grinding even harder, which was the stupid thing to do, but it is what it is. Poor decision. So I'd been on major labels. We had been on major labels, and we had sold, Jenny Says was a reasonable hit, but we were on a record label that actually actively stopped Jenny from being a bigger hit than it was, simply because nobody at the very top level. We had a lot of belief from like the mid-level executives and things like that, but the very top, they hadn't signed us because we were signed by one regime, and those people were fired and let go, and another regime came in. So we were stuck with, the people at the very top of the food chain who couldn't claim credit for us if we had massive hits. But at the same time, they didn't want to let us go because they knew we would probably get hits on another label and they would look stupid. So it was just bad luck of the draw, some poor decision making, and just kind of like, okay, well, I mean, we managed to create a lot of opportunities for ourselves within that kind of, that restricted situation. But, it is what it is, But so in that time period, the band was not getting along very well. There was a lot of reasons why. Some personalities who have gone, who have left, some of those personalities actually made it. I think they were kind of hoping, that the band would kind of fall apart if they weren't part of it. And it actually was the thing that actually helped us to survive, because once you get rid of that toxicity and that kind of cancer, you figure out what makes it work. You figure out, once you get rid of the cancer, it takes a while for the body to heal, but then you kind of figure out how to move forward. And we were kind of in that situation. And so I just had it, I had just had kind of an inspiration because we were just touring a lot, but not really writing new songs or anything like that. We had a pretty strong body of work, and we were just kind of living on that, because we couldn't really get along enough to write new songs, to come up with new material, and blah, blah, blah. And so, and I felt really isolated because a lot of the work was, left to me, to write the songs, to come up with the songs that would get radio play. I was the one busting my ass during the shows to keep the audiences interested. And, the people I had surrounded myself with, it seemed like they were pretty much kind of out to get me. It's kind of like, all these problems in my life are your fault. It's like, okay, we make great money. The shows are going great. We play packed shows. We're touring around in a tour bus. This is something we've worked towards all our lives. And, it's been a team effort, but at the same time, I don't expect anything different. I'm not asking to be paid more or anything like that, all for one, one for all. But, why are you beating me down? Why are you trying to, why are you beating me down to appease your ego? It's like, this is a rare situation. John and I, when we got together, when the band got together, we had both been in other bands that had been successful. And we knew how unusual that was, because we've been in a lot of bands that weren't successful. And when you're in a band that's successful, you realize, or a situation, whatever you want to call it, you realize that, okay, this is unusual. We need to keep going, because it's just basically, no matter how hard you work, no matter how good you are, a lot of it comes down to just blind luck, dumb luck, and so we realized how fortunate we were to have this thing, and we really have busted our ass to keep the ingredients together. And we had other people surrounding us who didn't understand that. And, there was all the typical cliche of rock and roll, drug addiction, alcoholism, egos, all this bullshit. And it's just like, why is this happening? We have something really special. People enjoy it. Go do your own thing if you want to, but this is what we do. Or better yet, quit if you're not happy. Just quit. But the band as a business was when it came up, I made it. I didn't realize this till later. I knew other bands, because when you step into that realm of, okay, this is actually a business, and you hope to achieve things, you have to form a business. It can't just be you and your buddies playing a show under a name for club. It's an actual tangible business. There are insurance involved, taxes involved, lawyers involved. And so, in my naivete, I insisted on Cowboy Mouth being a four-way business. There were other acts, and I'm not going to say who they are because it's their business, not mine. Other acts that of who, they present themselves as a band, but there's one person or two people who primarily own the business, and I didn't realize it could work that way. And plus, I was very much of the all for one, one for all, not noticing or not wanting really to acknowledge the toxic personalities that I had brought to the game, and if you're in a situation where you're playing with somebody who, brings the ball, and, if the game doesn't go the way they want it, they take their ball and go home, game's over. So it was like, I was dealing with that, dealing with a lot of stupid shit, a lot of cliche shit, there's so much. I mean, that was the thing that really bothered me a lot about it. Wasn't that it was not just that it was happening, but it was so unoriginal. It's like, if you're gonna fuck things up, do something creative with it, do something new, But so Always Give Thanks was written at a time. I wrote that piece a while after, about a trip I took to Jamaica. A buddy of mine who was this he was from Bryan, Texas, big old Texas guy, blonde haired, blue eyed, but he loved the Rastafarian culture. So he grew these dreads, and he was an older guy. He was like in his 40s or 50s, that he was a promoter. He was a music promoter, and him and I were just became friends. And he hold on just a second. He had always asked me, he's like, man, I got this cabin in Jamaica, man, and I go there and I bring gifts for these little kids, and it was this little cinder block thing, right? A cinder block house about the size of, not that big, small house, but it had 2 stories, and the second story was just plywood. It was very bare bones. Didn't have air conditioning, running water, electricity, nothing. So we had to go swim in the river, freshwater river right next to the cabin. It was in the middle of nowhere. The nearest city was maybe 50 miles away. And if you know Jamaica, that's like right in the center. It was in the rainforest, basically. And him and I were the only white people for literally miles, you know, not a big deal either way. It was just kind of like, okay, this is not what I'm used to at all. And, you had a lot of the real Rastafarians, they would live in the woods, and, they just have these kids, and they wouldn't really, raise them. They just kind of, okay, have fun, And so these kids kind of grew up parentless, but it was also the culture, I mean, people would look out for the kids, but it wasn't like you had families here, families there. It was like just basically the woods. So, are you asking me about the track itself or the story behind it or what?
Well, all of the above.
Okay, I just I, the story. I had just we had just finished touring for Jenny Says. And it was like 18 months straight, grind, 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 grind. And then the song hadn't gone as far as we'd hoped because of the machinations of the people at the very top of the food chain at our record label. We were held back. We managed to create opportunities because the song had such a impact that all of a sudden we started doing these radio festivals, which were popular back in the 90s and 2000s. And, I figured out early on that, these things would last all day, and they'd have a headliner at the top, like Beck, who was looking for, it was around 2 turntables and a microphone. In Excess, bands like that, that could conceivably play an arena and draw well. It was basically legalized payola. We'll play your show, we'll do it for this amount, which would be lower than they'd normally get, but enough to cover their expenses. But you need to play our record, Midnight Oil. We did one with Midnight Oil. We did a lot of them with Beck and a lot with In Excess. But there would be these all-day festivals, and I learned early on, you'd play like an arena or an outdoor amphitheater, and the people who bought tickets, they would buy tickets for the headliner. The shows would start like 10 o'clock in the morning, and the headliner would come on at 9 o'clock at night. So you'd see these bands. I remember this. We saw this band. They were a good little band, but they're on this amphitheater stage at like 11 o'clock in the morning, and they looked so tiny. And you could just tell they were uncomfortable. They're playing their 30-minute set. We had to play after them. And I just remember thinking, wow, this sucks. And so like you'd be playing to an amphitheater, and there'd be a bunch of people camping out, or like setting up picnic, little picnic areas in the grassy area, but all the seats were almost completely empty. And that's where we started. It's like, okay, I see how this is. And so I figured out at that point, we got to do something. And I was known for being a wild man and all that type of stuff. I bought a wireless mic, in the clubs. I was known for that. He'll do any, I just used that part of my personality to get people to talk about the band, to come see us. So we'd start selling out shows, right? And we did really well for a long time. And but it wasn't like I was faking. It wasn't like I'll do this and people will think I was nuts. This is part of my personality as a performer, and I just used it consciously. So then I realized, okay, this is where we are. Here are the rules. Let's break the rules. So it wasn't like you were looking at getting any real satisfaction of playing a half an hour. So instead of trying to play a bunch of songs, we played like 4 songs. First song, after we proved, we did half the song. The band is good. People know the band is good. Okay, grab my wireless mic, hop off the stage, run through the cheap seats, and go over to the people in the in the grassy area. Hey guys, what's up? How you doing? We're up here to kick ass, and you guys need to just come on with me. And they would follow me. And we started riots, because like security would come and all these people were climbing over. You try to create a moment, because my goal wasn't to just, my goal, because all these shows were held on like Fridays or Saturdays, sometimes Sundays, my goal wasn't to have people say, oh, Cowboy Mouth, it was really good. It was good. I wanted the morning DJ on all of these stations, the morning DJ who was usually the most high profile and highest paid, I wanted them to say this every morning show after we would play one of these shows. So-and-so was great. So-and-so was great. But man, did you see Cowboy Mouth? Wow, that was crazy. Those guys are, you know, and it worked every single time. And so that's how we kind of built our live reputation around the country without the assistance of our label, who were actively squelching our song. So, so there'd been about 18 months of that, you know, promoting Jenny and everything. And at the end of the 18 months, you know, I realized that, you know, I realized a couple of things. I realized that, you know, at the end of 18 months, I was engaged to a woman. I didn't want to get married, but you know, it was that kind of thing. You either break up or get married. So, you know, I was engaged to her, and during the tour, she figured out that she didn't want to marry me, and I did not take that well. But fortunately, I was in a situation where I was banging drums and screaming every day, and what better way to get over heartbreak than that? So, I'd realized, you know, I came home and I was just exhausted, and her and I had broken up, and my life wasn't where I wanted it to be. It was like I'd worked so hard, I'd reached all my goals. I had a major label contract, had an album that had done well, and you know, I didn't really have much to show for it. And I remember I was exhausted, and then I was going to have to start grinding and touring again the next year. I thought, man, this isn't what I signed up for. You know, I enjoyed the shows. I enjoyed playing the shows. I always did, even during those times of conflict with the others. When I was on stage, I always focused on it. I always had a great time playing the show. It was the other 22 hours a day that were a drag. So I went with my buddy. He'd been asking me for years, hey man, come on. So I didn't have anything to do that Christmas because, you know, I wasn't with somebody and I didn't feel like celebrating. So I went to Walmart or Kmart and I bought about $300 worth of little trinket toys and things like that, and just ended up being Santa Claus to all these kids who just lived in the jungle who didn't really have anything. And there was a little kind of convenience store, like situated in the middle of this jungle area, where it was kind of like the social center. It was the only store literally for miles. So people would come and just buy food there or whatever. It's really wild. I found some pictures of it recently. And I came across, you know, the story is completely true. Everything in there is just verbatim, you know, and I was kind of lost in my head, and I met this guy. He was kind of an acquaintance of the guy I went there with. He was a Rastafarian guy. And I rode him in a little car we had rented, little piece of shit car we'd rented just to drive around, just to get from like Ocho Rios to where we're staying in the jungle. And because it literally was a fucking jungle. And I was driving, you know, apparently being seen in a car at the time was a big deal, you know. And he was like, hey, this is pretty cool, you know. And so I dropped him off. And his house was just literally like 4 or 5 sheets of plywood, nothing else. And I was like, oh shit, you know. And he looked at me and he thanked me. He said, hey, remember, always give thanks. I was like, okay. And it was just kind of like, my perspective changed. Okay. I was sitting there, I was the one with the record contract and people screaming and going crazy and yada, yada, all this crazy shit, all the things I thought I wanted. And I was fucking miserable as hell. And this guy had a plywood shack and he was telling me to remember to be appreciative, you know. I was like, okay, all right. It's like, I get it, you know. So,
Yeah.
So that was pretty much the crux of that story. And I've learned since then, you know, the power of gratitude, the power of just being thankful for your situation, you know. And there's a lot of strength in that. You know, I didn't realize that a lot in life because I was, you know, for a while I was angry or I was trying to push for something or just, you know, go, 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 you know. And just that whole idea of just stopping and just being grateful, understanding that, nobody in this life has it easy. Some people seem to have it easier, but nobody in this life has it easy. And, that was a big part of that. That story is totally true. And I wrote a thing of short stories, and then put it out as on an album, but never really did anything with it. It just kind of sits there. People can find it if they want.
That might be what I found when I was talking about.
Maybe so.
But I think it was signed by you, the one I found.
Oh, you got one of the little green books? You got one of the little.
I'll look it up. I haven't bought it yet, but I did find it.
Yeah, I gave that to a friend of mine, and he printed it up as a book for me, and I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. And he did a whole thing where he put like a CD together and all this type of stuff, and he wanted to sell them, and I felt kind of odd about it because our relationship was like up and down and up and down and up and down. And good dude, he was. It's so funny. This guy, he's one of those motivational speakers, Tony Robbins-esque kind of guy. Good dude, but I mean, there's a certain amount of salesmanship that comes with those guys, But he was a genuinely good guy. But those guys are very intense, and you're either in their orbit or you're not, And I found myself in his orbit. A few times, but it was difficult. It's difficult for people like that to kind of see outside of their world, and because their world basically revolves around them. But this guy, he hired us to do some gigs for him as part of some of his seminars, and they were really good paying. I was like, great, awesome, But then we became friends, and he stopped doing it since because of medical reasons. But he built quite an empire. And he would always tell me that he built a lot of what he did around what I said and did at shows, I mean, he took it a lot farther, and it's definitely his own thing, but he was worth a lot of money. I was like, dude, is there an inspiration fee or anything like that? But, I was joking, of course. I'd never charge anybody for this because, we're all just walking through life, and just got to watch where the water goes. And so he put the book and the CD together, and it was like, oh, this is kind of cool. But I never really did anything with it. I didn't really know what to do with it. I found a few like a couple of years ago and gave them to our merchandise people to sell. So that's probably where you got one. And but it's there. Like there's a couple of stories that are on YouTube you can find. There's one called Madison, about the first time I actually came up with the idea of being glad to be alive, because I was almost killed. It was like, there may be one up called Lana. If it's not up, remind me, I'll send you that one. That one's, you got to hear that one.
I will do so.
It's different. It's intense.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's, let me see real quick here. Oh, I lost you again. Shit. Did I lose you? Are you there?
I'm still here.
Okay. Let me see something real quick. Don't know if you ever put that one up. Nope. Okay, I'll have to send you that one. Because of the nature of it, he probably didn't put it up. So let me look for it real quick, if you don't mind. Do you have the disc with Always Give Thanks on it?
No, that's what I have pulled up.
Do you have the disc?
No, I haven't purchased it yet.
Okay. Well, I don't know if it's available. Let's see. Let me see here.
$17 on Amazon, used.
Yeah, well, I don't even have a copy of it anymore, so, or otherwise I'd just send you one. Hold on, let me see something here. But by the nature of what it is, you'll understand why our guy probably hasn't put it up.
I'll take a look. And that leads us to the last song I had questions about. We kind of touched on it a number of times, but time permitting, I have more questions about it. But who is Jenny?
Jenny was my
Yeah.
first girlfriend.
Okay.
We broke up, and she broke up with me. She was seeing somebody else. She had moved to another city. She had moved to Atlanta, and I was already. She was seeing somebody, and but I mean, long distance relationship. This is back in the '80s, before the internet and all that type of stuff. When somebody lived far away, they lived far away. So, and it just kind of hurt, and it sucked that that was the way it went down. Um, but it was odd because I remember coming up with that part, thinking, okay, I feel this, and this song is coming out of me, but it wasn't like the chorus was strange because it was like I wasn't I wasn't coming up with it. I wasn't writing it. Something was telling me that this is part of the story. Let it go. Let it go. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Because and all these other things going on. I had just kind of found it was that first successful band I was in, and it was quite a wild ride. I mean, I look at it with a lot of fondness now, simply because I was so young, and I never really had that many worldly experiences. I'd barely been out of New Orleans, and all of a sudden I was with this band, and the band took off real fast, and there was a three-piece, and the other guys were more interested in, doing drugs and chasing broads and getting hammered and things like that. Because all of a sudden, hey, we're successful. These are the perks of success. We're going to enjoy those. And I was like, guys, we need to work on our songwriting and blah, 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 blah. And they're like, we're going to do all the drugs. We're going to have sex with all the women. It was like you just let these guys go. And it was difficult. It was so insane. I remember thinking every week, at some point, every week during my time in this band, I literally would think to myself, we could die. We could die. I mean, it was just the situations we found ourselves in were just so nuts. And I'd never been confronted with anything like that in my life. And I grew up fast, but I was like 21 at the time, but it was all of a sudden just it's like I dove into a hurricane. And the band hadn't been successful before I joined. In fact, it was kind of a joke band, but I saw potential in it, and the guy asked me to join. And then all of a sudden, like, things just, it was Cowboy Mouth. It was the same thing. It's like, once we got it together, it was, didn't mean there was a lot of work. Didn't mean that it wasn't easy, but we locked into something. It's like, okay, this is really good. We need to keep this going. And I tried to keep that going, but it got to a point where it was detrimental to my physical and emotional well-being. So I had to leave. But and one of the casualties of that was my girlfriend Jenny, and it was me telling myself, the better angels of my nature, I guess, just telling me, hey, let it go. Doesn't matter. There's going to be lots of conflicts in life. Jenny says this, Jenny says that. It's just I'd kind of allowed myself to become a little submissive, and I wasn't happy about that. It was like, okay, whatever you want, blah, blah, blah. That's a personality trait I've worked hard to kind of go against, because it never works out unless you stand up for who you are as a person on a regular basis. People are just going to walk all over you. And that's kind of what I was realizing at the time, although it took me getting my emotional ass kicked many more times before I figured that out. But it is what it is. But it was kind of like, I got no reason for the things I fear, the things that plague me when I see and hear, just being overcome by worries and things like that. Just, my better, your angels or whatever, or your intuition just saying, hey, relax, things will be okay. Just go with the flow. It's same thing, just, watch where the water goes, and it's difficult sometimes to kind of keep on a steady path when there's so much noise around you and chaos, But that was a situation I put myself in because I wanted the rewards, and I wanted to use my abilities and my talents in a certain arena. And so, that was a situation I found myself in. I learned a lot. But It was hard. It was hard. But, you know, when I quit that, I also had to learn that, okay, I was in a strong situation. I was in a very creatively, while it was volatile, it was also very, there was a lot of merit to it. And perhaps if I'd grown up and not been so emotional and not allowed my opinion to be swayed by people around me, I could have made it work, because that was the thing that because I was a fan of this band. I really enjoyed what we did, but, I kind of saw where it was going to go. And eventually, even after I quit, they rose the ranks, they got more well-known, became more successful, but eventually it all crashed and burned just like I knew it would. So, but Jenny says, there was a real Jenny, there is a real Jenny. And it was really unusual because years after we split up, in fact, I was seeing somebody else, her mom called me. Her name was Jeanette, really nice lady. And her parents didn't really like me that much when we first started dating, but they became fond of me. And then when, I started getting well known, that's always been kind of a pattern, but they were always very kind to me, even when they didn't like me, they were very nice. Well, I, in the course of playing in that band, I realized, hey, I've got a voice. I can sing. I always kind of sensed that I could sing, but I didn't, you know, everybody thinks they can sing, everybody thinks they're a drummer, and I realized, okay, I can sing. And sometimes like the shows were so kind of nuts and chaotic that sometimes things would break down, or, like the guys would be so drunk that they'd have to go pee or throw up or something like that, and there you are in front of 1,000 people. I got to go take a piss. And it's like, okay, so what do you do for 5 minutes? Okay, let me sing. I'll just sing. So I started singing Mona Lisa, Mona Lisa, because I really enjoyed Nat King Cole, and it got a huge response. I mean, like not like, oh, that's very nice. It was like, wow. I was like, okay, there's something here, right? And then I would sing other songs like Amazing Grace, and in Cowboy Mouth, I sang. I used to sing like Somewhere Over the Rainbow. It's really, just to fill in time.
That's my favorite version of that song, by the way.
Thank you. Did you get the one from Jazz Fest 2006?
The one I saw was a darkly lit, looked like a club. It was not outdoors.
I think that was probably the Rock Boat. There's one. I'll tell you that story in a sec. But so I started realizing that I could sing, and people were responding to these moments. So it's like, okay. And then from there, once I quit that band, I realized that I wanted to be a front guy, that I wanted to be a drummer. But anyway, that's a whole other story. Jenny was a real girl. Oh yeah, her mom. So I would start, and one time I think her mom heard me sing Amazing Grace. Well, she had developed cancer and called me about a month before she died. She said, Fred, and this was out of the blue. She's like, Fred, it's Miss Jeanette. I have cancer and I'm probably going to die in about a month. And I'd appreciate it if you sang Amazing Grace at my funeral. And it was like, I wasn't really prepared for that, but it was during Cowboy Mouth days. And I think Jenny hadn't been a hit yet. And so, so she died, and a month later, I went and sang at her funeral. It was really something. It was really special. Her family, the family still keeps in touch with me. Like some of the sisters, I'll hear from them like once every other year or something like that. And it was funny because I went to my folks' house, my parents' house, after the funeral, and she said, and my mom was there. She's like, where are you coming from? Because she saw that I was dressed up. And I said, well, you remember Jenny, her mom died. She said, really? I said, yeah. And she asked me about a month ago to sing Amazing Grace at her funeral. And, my mom was she had a wild sense of humor. She said, well, if you sing Amazing Grace at my funeral, I'm going to come back and I'm going to haunt you. And I said, oh, Mom, don't worry about it. I've already got the song picked for you, for your funeral. She goes, what's that? I go, ding dong, the witches. And she, you know, we had a really good laugh. That was my mom's sense of humor. You had to understand that. My family's always had kind of a twisted sense of humor. My dad, even though he was not an outgoing personality, he was one of those guys, and my brothers that the same way too, where they don't say much, but they can say that one word that just sends everybody into hysterics. You know the type. So anyway, Jenny was a real person. The story was true. It's about me dealing with our breakup and just kind of having, you know, whoever, my intuition say, let it go. Just let it go. Things will get better. And they did, you know. And I got this song, and it's kind of like the musical money shot of the Cowboy I'll show you, man. Because I mean,
was that a turning point?
Huh?
Was that song a turning point in the trajectory of your career?
For Cowboy Mouth, yeah. I mean, when we first started the band, the other guys wanted to play it because it had gotten some notoriety with my first band, Dash Rip Rock. It wasn't my first band; it was the first band that did something on a national level that had real tangible success that I could pay my bills with, even though I was living in a $200 a month apartment. You know, there weren't really many bills to pay, but but it was the first time something like that, and John and our old guitar player Paul and another bass player we had whose name was also Paul, they were like, man, we need to play that song. I was like, I don't want to play that song. It's an old song. I don't want to play it. And they actually talked me into it. And, you know, I'm glad they did. So, you know, it worked out. So, and, you know, I've really become fond of the song over the years. There's a lot of people who don't like playing their hit songs. I've played that song every night, honestly, since 1986. And, you know, it's well written. The structure is powerful. It says a lot, but, you know, I didn't want to describe where I was emotionally. So on the nail, it's like, oh, I got my heart broke, boo, boo, hoo. You know, it was like, I'm describing it. I'm kind of using some wordplay because I was just starting to write songs, and I was just starting to write good songs. It was like, there were some other songs I had written for that band that had gotten a lot of attention at the time that Cowboy didn't play and doesn't play. But I was noticing I was coming into my own as a songwriter, and I was just playing with words. There's a lot of things I put in there to disguise how I was feeling. You know, got no reason for the things I fear. Things plague me when I see and hear. A dime is a nickel, a nickel is none. I'll throw myself to the Sunday sun. You know, it doesn't matter. All this, everything going on doesn't fucking matter. A summer Sunday when you went insane, and the line of she said you're going, but that I came. That's kind of the struggles of a long distance relationship, you know. And got seeing apples in an orange cart. The ties that bind, you know, caring for somebody, they're tearing me apart. That's pretty self-explanatory. And then what's the next one? I got no reason for the things I do.
The deal is screwed.
Yeah, taking a chance on something, on a situation, and having it fall apart. You know, it's just like, you know, the natural inclination is to just say, well, I'm not going to do that again. But that's stupid. You have to take chances in life, you know. And for the things I do, the deal of deals, and then the deal is screwed. Lots of forces in a modern world that take their toll upon a modern girl. She was going through stuff just like I was. And it was like, I can't just sit there and live through my misery. I have to understand that, you know, she's, you know, even though she's moved on, there's a lot of emotional things that she was going through too. Whatever I'm going through, I have to understand that either she's going through or she went through, you know. And there was a lot of pain when you're young, trying to keep a long distance relationship going. It sucks. And so you're going, but I said I came. What's after that? The things I do.
I mean, I think you should know the lyrics of this song, man.
I do. I know them. I know a lot of the lyrics, but a lot of it comes through muscle memory. You know, I don't actually think consciously about the songs when I'm singing them. Because if I did that, then it would just be draining all the time to relive those fucking moments. What is it?
Where were you?
Got no reason for the things I do, the deal of deals and deal screws. There's lots of force in the modern world. told upon a modern girl. I got no reason for the things I hear. Here.
Throw your cards upon a playing table. That part.
Yeah, throw your cards upon a playing table. I had the idea of Cain and Abel, you know, just that whole biblical thing, you know, and you know, Abel was the good brother, but Cain killed him, and we're all descendants of Cain. That's just playing with Bible imagery and shit like that. And I'm now unable. Abel's not there, so you know the worst parts of my psyche can take over. You know, so you know that was just me playing with words, but also kind of like, okay, I have an opportunity here. Am I going to be a fucking asshole, or am I going to be a good guy? And you know, we're all equal parts both. We all have that in our apple. We all have that worm in our apple, as they say. So.
Look, Fred, it looks like we're just about out of time here. I do appreciate.
I got a couple minutes. I got a couple minutes.
Well, I have a I appreciate you sharing your story. Certainly sharing your family through song. You're a very, very, very impressive lyricist. Wow. But as we are approaching, well, I've read a lot of your lyrics for a lot of time.
Thank you.
If you are willing and able, it would be wonderful if you could play us out with an acoustic cover of I Believe.
I Believe?
Yes, sir.
Let's see here. My voice is a little torn up from the weekend, so. Gonna deal with the restlessness inside, worried mind. How you think you ever gonna get ahead? You're so far behind. Step inside this endless moment for a subtle touch of grace. I've always found my strength inside the act of faith. I believe in the spirit of rock and roll, the eternal strength of the immortal soul. But sometimes everybody's gotta let it go. I believe in the power of love. I believe in the sound of Salmon Day. Little children should occasion on misbehave. That all that you get is all that you gain. I believe in the power of love. You know, I forgot about that line. I've always found my strength inside the act of faith. That was a very conscious line, because you know, it's not just having faith, and I'm not just talking about faith in God. I'm talking about faith in things you put your, because faith is basically energy. It's where you put your energy into, whether it's God, family. For me at the time, it was you know, it was music and writing songs and playing these shows, you know, and just, you know, it's not just faith in and of itself, but it's the act of faith. You know, it's taking action based on the things you believe in. You know, it's like, I believe in all these things, but I find my strength when I act on my faith, whatever that faith is in the moment, because it's not about finding strength through playing drums or singing. It's the strength is actually in my faith, and faith is that bridge, you know, the leap of faith, as they call it. You know, that line was very important to me, because it was showing not act as something like acting like I have faith. It's the action of faith. You know? Because I figured out years ago that faith is a very, very powerful motivator. You know? And you know, faith is something that you can, you know, it can build skyscrapers. You know, creates the airplane. Everything that we see that's tangible in this world existed in somebody's imagination long before it came into being, whether it's a song, whether it's a building or a city or a town or a country or an idea or something like that. It all existed in somebody's mind or imagination, you know, and we are all products of the imagination of something greater. I believe God, or however you want to put that. You know, I've gotten a lot of inspiration and impetus out of like Joseph Murphy, like I said earlier. And there's a great lecture by a guy named Neville Goddard. You can find him on YouTube. You know, it's called shit. Live in the End. It goes up. Live in the End. It's about basically using the power of imagination in your own life. And that's something I discovered, like about maybe 10 years ago, that started kind of resonating with me about 5 years ago. When I was going through my first, the ending of my first marriage. And I've really used those things, the power of imagination and how to project your energy towards your goals. I've really used a lot of that stuff to really focus my life and focus my goals. And I've had some fucking amazing things happen. There's like The Secret of Life, Joseph Murphy. It's basically the way he approaches it. I'll let you read it. I'll let you see it for yourself. It's simple, but it's very, I believe, very profound. I had this quick story, and then I need to go bathe because I smell like a shoe. During the lockdown, there was a lot of time where it was the first time I'd not been in constant movement since 1985, and there was a lot of, fans, or, from the fan base, a lot of people who've been following the band, who were able to get in touch with me. I was able to hear stories about songs and shows like you. And it was really very rewarding because people would tell me these stories. Every band gets them. Every singer gets them. It's not like I'm unique or special in that way, but it was really nice to hear what a positive effect that me and the band and the songs had on people over the years. It was like, oh, okay, maybe I haven't been wasting my time, okay, so it's anyway. So this guy, his wife reached out to me, and you get these sometimes, and they can be pretty uncomfortable simply because you don't know how to respond, not for lack of desire. It's just kind of like, I don't know what to do to help you here. And she called me and she said, she had reached out via email and left me her phone number. So I called, and she had said her husband was dying of cancer. And, people in that mindset, they're looking for any sort of validation they can, and they had followed the band. I didn't know them, but, it was obvious they followed the band. Could you just call my husband and talk to him? And she was just looking for any sort of validation. Oh, Fred from Calvin, I've called so-and-so. Yeah. That type of thing. I was like, okay, why not? So I called, and the guy was like, he was close. My understanding at the time, he was supposedly about 3 or 4 months from the end, and he sounded rough. And I figured, well, what the hell? I said, you know what? I want you to do me a favor. I want you to listen to this lecture, listen to these 2 lectures. It's all about just basically changing your energy and putting your mind in a certain way. And just do me a favor, listen to them. And just listen to one of them, listen to the shortest one, listen to it every day. At this point, he didn't really have anything to lose, he was just laying in bed. I said, just listen. Just, can you do me that favor? He's like, sure. I didn't tell him what it's about or anything like that. I just said, just give it a listen. So about a year goes by. Hadn't heard anything. We're playing a show, an outdoor show in Houston, this outdoor venue right on the Gulf. It's around Houston. And it was one of the first shows we played after lockdown. So after shows, I go out and, I talk to people, take pictures, hugs, and this type of stuff. And, and I sit next to the merchandise area, because if we can sell merchandise, that actually helps everything iron out financially for us, But, I'm very happy to talk to people and hear their stories. And even if they don't buy something, it's fine. So this woman comes up to me and she says, and the way she approached me was just like, hey, listen, I don't know if you remember me, but I called you and asked you to talk to my husband. And the way she was talking to me, I thought, okay, well, he died. I was like, I said, yeah, I remember. And, how are you doing? It's like, I'm doing fine. It's like, and for some reason I asked, well, how's he doing? And she goes, oh, he's right here. She turns and there's this like 6.5 foot tall fucking Sasquatch next to me, healthy as a fucking horse, right? And I looked at him, I go, well, are you doing what it says in the thing? He goes, every fucking day. I said, well, how are you doing? He goes, I'm in remission. I was like, awesome. Gave him a hug. And, I'm not saying that this thing did that, but, it's, you put that stuff out in the world of changing your mind and changing your life, not in some sort of cliche sort of, Tony Robbins-esque way. Not that I don't believe there's validity to what he does. I think, obviously, but, just the idea of using, look, if you get a cut arm, you use your hands to put a Band-Aid on it, it's just using the tools that God gives you to heal yourself or to help yourself or to, live the life you want to live. And there's a lot in there. And, I've used that stuff to create miracles in my life. So for what it's worth, for better or worse,
Sure.
give it a shot. You got nothing to lose. So Joseph Murphy's Secret of Life, listen to it and do what it says to do every day.
Okay.
Every day.
Well, that'll work.
All right.
I appreciate you, man.
Take care, Tim.
You too.
Leave meeting.
This has been a production of Where You At Studios, LLC.